With the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up this weekend, the date is one that many people will never forget, and for many, the memories will cause them to relive the trauma from that tragic day. And many survivors say thinking of that day is too painful, and young children who saw the events play out were forever changed by the attacks. Psychiatrist, author, and commentator Carole Lieberman is with us now to talk about about PTSD while dealing with the aftermath of 9/11. Carole, good afternoon, and welcome to BNC.
Thank you.
And Carole, we know obviously this day it's a sad reminder of what happened 20 years ago was coming up. You know, although it's been 20 years since 9/11, for many people the memories are still very, very raw. What will it be like for those forced to relive those moments of terror again?
This year, this 20th anniversary is going to be the most emotionally challenging anniversary ever since 9/11. And that's because not only will we have the normal triggers, the usual triggers that remind us of that day, but, and it could be anything from what you had to eat for breakfast on the original 9/11 to, of course, reports and pictures and all of that. But this year, it's going to be even worse because if someone would have asked you at the time of 2020, if you thought 20 years from now we would be surrendering to our enemies, we would have said absolutely no way. And yet that is what we have to acknowledge. We have just surrendered in Afghanistan to terrorists. And so it makes it even harder because now the biggest trigger is the fact that we are still in danger or in danger again from terrorists.
And we've heard that from so many people who served over in Afghanistan since this whole crisis has been going on in Afghanistan. But, for those people who are dealing with that, as you say, what are some ways that people can actually cope during this difficult time?
Well, it really is important not to hide from 9/11. All of these years, we have really not been, the commemoration of 9/11 has been getting less and less. And that it isn't good to keep hiding from it either, because it takes a lot of psychological energy to keep pretending to yourself that 9/11 didn't happen or the current events aren't happening. So it is better to participate to the extent that you can in watching, the tributes and so on. But doing other things too to prepare. So, for example, making arrangements to either join a community event that's happening that day, or to be with your friends or your family or people where you can comfort each other. And of course, with kids, you were mentioning, even children, obviously anyone who's less than 20 years old wasn't born then. Of course, even people who are up to 30 years old, those people were affected by the parents who were affected by 9/11. But even for children who weren't born yet, parents have to talk to their kids about it. They can't pretend that this isn't happening, or that it didn't happen, or that there isn't still this current danger. So, they need to get kids to express their feelings, to ask questions, and to tell them, to the degree that they are psychologically comfortable, that the kids are old and, depending upon their age, in other words, and how psychologically mature they are. That's how you couch, or that's how you describe what terrorism is. I talk about in my book, Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. I talk about a terrorist as being like a bully on the playground. So there are ways that you can put all kinds of, things that are connected with terrorism in ways that kids can understand and that aren't frightening.
Yeah, and I remember being in the classroom myself when this happened, so I'll never forget that day as well. The terrorist attacks occurred in New York and at the Pentagon, impacting so many Americans. How can seeing images from that day impact people who are already dealing with depression and anxiety at this time?
Yes, people who already have some kind of psychological problem, such as anxiety or depression, they are going to be more vulnerable to the impact of the day and PTSD, and and some people, when I talk about preparing in advance, one thing that people might do is to make arrangements to have an appointment with a therapist, either on that day or the next day or the next week or even before 9/11, to actually be able to come to 9/11 in a more in a healthier way, in a stabler way. And what's interesting is that, and some people may not know this, there have been studies that show that people who weren't in any of those cities that you just mentioned, but who watched the Twin Towers fall again and again, and we were all mesmerized by that, horrified by it, but mesmerized. Also, if we watched people jumping from the towers or those kinds of traumatic images, the more we watch those kinds of things at the time or over the years, the more vulnerable we are to that, to getting PTSD. You didn't have to be in those cities. You could just be watching it on television, because PTSD is either a life-threatening event happens to you or you witness it. So we have all witnessed it, and some of us for many more hours than others.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to forget, as we said before. Well, Carole, thank you so much for giving our viewers this information. We appreciate your time.